Thank you. It's Wednesday. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, December 29th.
No.
Hello, Hockey World. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, December 28th, 2016.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today. I know what the date is.
And I'm Eklund. And you're watching HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast brought to you by viewers like you at patreon.com/hockey. And coming to you 5 days a week at least. Well, pretty much at most. Monday through Friday.
We hope.
Yes, at most, Monday through Friday. And season greetings, everybody. How are you guys doing? How were your holidays?
Same here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm happy that we're past it. So let's get going.
Okay. All right. There was no skating on the rink. Thanks, Russ. Russ is the only one who cared, I think, which is appreciated.
I did. I was
for all my hard work. The rink made it. It didn't work. It did not work. It was working fine. I had it going every day, and then Christmas Eve morning, I wake up and it's raining. To which I try to get the tarp off of it because that's the best thing to do. And that's a mess. And then, of course, it was like 65 degrees yesterday.
Well, strangely enough, their forecast is for rain in Toronto on Saturday for the alumni game between the Detroit Red Wings and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But the forecast for the Centennial Classic is, I think it's cold and like 30 degrees, but no precipitation. So if there is rain, they will sacrifice the alumni game for the quality of the ice.
Yeah. But next year, invite over Dan Craig for drinks or something. Maybe he could, help you. You got to do.
I do have to talk to him at one point. I feel embarrassed though, because I've talked to him about the ice conditions before. I feel embarrassed to say. And by the way, I have a rink too. I'm sure I get that question all the time, but I feel embarrassed to ask him that question.
It's been the strangest weather though, because we had very, very cold weather in Michigan, and we had a foot of snow was on the ground, and I have an 80-yard driveway, and,
oh my God,
I never got it shoveled off, so I just created ruts so that I could drive up and down, and then lo and behold, it's 57 degrees yesterday, and there's no snow. There was no sign that there was ever any snow.
And you had a really nice white Christmas though, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was great. And it was funny thing is my grandkids are here. In fact, they'll come busting in at any moment, and then,
awesome.
It'll be loud. But they wanted to go out and play in the snow, and, they're only 4 and 2. So the whole grasp of melting snow is beyond them at this point. So, they woke up and said, well, we'll go out and play in the snow. And my wife had to say, it melted all yesterday. So they didn't
So now you got lots of mud. Yeah, so that's what we have, even with just my ice is just completely just a pool now at this point. At which point I have to just empty the whole thing out and start again, which sucks. But I'm gonna do the whole pumping the water out, because you'll never freeze. Like, once you get like 6 inches of water in there, it won't freeze. So I've got to empty it out, which is not fun. And then maybe we're not going to get nice weather not cold enough weather until like 2 weeks from now. So I just throw my arms up in the air again about this area. We should have moved just a little bit further north. I would have been fine. Everything would have been okay.
Yeah, because you're not really far enough out in Pennsylvania. You're not. Right.
We're right at the edge right here. So anyway, let's get into World Junior Hockey for a second.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, maybe you guys already did. Did you guys discuss the Mike Harrington piece on the Buffalo Sabres?
I wrote about it on our new column, NHL Rumor Buzz, but we definitely should talk about it because
it was really a fascinating piece that Harrington did. He did a really nice job. He's very much a guy who's wired into the team, and essentially he sort of called the Sabres out with regard to where they are in the rebuild, and he questioned whether they're headed in the right direction. Despite the fact that I think everybody looks at this team and says, okay, they got Eichel, they've got Sam Reinhart, they got Ristolainen, they've got a collection of younger players. Basically he just said, he's asking, is Dan Bylsma the right coach? There seemed to be, in his mind, some questions about whether he's made the right moves. There's questions, he brought up whether Leonard is the right goalie, whether Murray had given up too much on the Vander Kane deal. And Kane actually is hot right now, playing pretty well. But and just sort of looking at the Sabres, and maybe they're headed in the wrong direction. What's fascinating about that is the exhibit A of how difficult it is to rebuild is the Edmonton Oilers.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, we see the Toronto Maple Leafs, who I think the Shannon plan has been fantastic. I think it's worked to perfection. I like where they're headed. They got the right general manager, the right coach. I like how they're rebuilding everything else. Well, the Edmonton Oilers have picked early in the draft for so many years, and it's just only this season that it looks like it's sort of coming together, but it's taken forever. And I think the question that it's worth debating is, is there does rebuilding guarantee you're going to be fine in a few years, or is there more than one way to rebuild? I guess is the question.
That's a great question. I mean, to me, it comes down to one concept basically, and that is you can rebuild through the draft, but you can't really become great unless you get an actually great player. Beyond, to me, the things are starting to look better in Edmonton because of McDavid, right? Not just things are looking good in Toronto because of Matthews. Now there's other things as well, but I'm just saying that at the end of the day, let me finish. And I know different opinion on that, but I think that no, but I mean, you can build great players, but yeah, how you rebuild a team. The Penguins did it. The Penguins are another great example of how to do it right. I mean, the Penguins basically fielded an AHL team. We always joke around for 4 years, and got ended up getting Marc-Andre Fleury, Crosby, Malkin, the
Ryan
one Stahl brother, and all that, and Jordan Stahl, and they put that thing together by being bad for a bunch of years. But they drafted a defenseman, a goalie, and 2 forwards really with 4 picks, right? So they really went. Now Edmonton drafted all forwards. So that to me was always the difference of okay, there's that. Mike, thoughts?
Well, I mean, and I read Harrington's piece, and like I said, I wrote about it for yesterday. The thing that he pointed out, I think there's enough blame to go around in Buffalo because there's a lot of criticism of Bylsma that whatever system he's using, he's losing some players in the mix. A guy like Zemgus Girgensons, who played very well under Ted Nolan, seems to be lost under Bylsma, and I think he's a talented kid. It's just he just doesn't seem to work with what Bylsma is trying to do. Eichel is a great player, but injuries have hurt him a little bit this year. They made the trade for Ryan O'Reilly, and that was a steal, but he's been hurt a couple times. Where the thing that is a problematic for the Sabres is Leonard is not the goalie that they thought he was going to be, as Kevin said, and they made trades for defense. They brought in Josh Georges. He has not been good. They signed Cody Franzen. He has not been the player that he was in Toronto. And the Dmitry Kulikov deal, he had a really good year in Florida last year, had a good playoff last year, comes in. They struck out, we at the draft, I remember there were a lot of rumors about them getting Shattenkirk. They sort of got the consolation prize in getting Kulikov or Mark Pysyk. And in 20 games, he's got no points and is the biggest minus on the team. So Tim Murray's decision-making has to be called into question as well.
I put it on Murray. I will say this, though, in regards to the Pittsburgh situation, Craig Patrick traded up for Marc-Andre Fleury, and it was a brilliant move, and he doesn't get enough credit for it because if he didn't do that, I don't think they would have won 1 Stanley Cup. I think that was what really started things for them, is him doing that. I think that was the big move, right? But getting past that, Murray definitely has not done the right signings. The defenseman signings were not good. The Evander Kane trade, the Bogosian trade, there's just all of these things have been shortfall. The players they have are fine. What I didn't like about the Harrington piece is talking about Sam Reinhart underperforming. He is a streaky guy. People say the same thing about Braden Shen here in Philly, and then when he ends up with 50, 60 points, then people just say, well, he wasn't consistent. And they do this with Reinhart too. Reinhart is not a superstar.
Maybe he's just a really good second-line player, right? I mean,
there were other players available in the draft, and he is a really good second-line talent. That's what he is. And they went with him. I think it's fine that they went with him. It's his second season. He's probably still going to have 15 to 18 goals. And it's not like he's killing that team. He's not. The goaltending is hurting him, and the defense. Look, Brendan Gooley's in the system. Will Borgen. After that, they don't have a lot. They haven't drafted enough defensemen, and it starts at the top because they haven't used that as the edict.
Well, and Harrington in his column on Sunday, he does an Inside the NHL column, which is always very good. And he sort of put the Sabres and the Leafs side by side. And if you look what's going on right now, the Leafs arguably have their goaltender. It's Frederik Andersen after a slow month.
Really arguable to me.
Well, I don't know. He's played back. He's played very.
I know he's played. I know, but
for now he has their goaltender. I agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah, I do too. I like the trade right from the beginning.
okay.
And okay, they have Matthews. The Sabres have Eichel. I think that's I think Matthews may be a little better, but I think Eichel is a great player. So I think the cornerstone pieces are there. But what Harrington's point was that the secondary players weren't there. Like whereas he was sort of bemoaning the fact that they lost the lottery twice, didn't get Ekblad, didn't get McDavid, and instead got the consolation prizes in Reinhart and Eichel. I think Reinhart's a fine player. He may not be as good as Mitch Marner, but he's a good player. So, they just have to sort of, make chicken salad out of chicken bleep.
Out of chicken wings? How about that?
But even the Mitch Marner thing, I didn't like that Harrington wrote that he hit the rookie wall. He has 22 points. There's going to be ebbs and flows in every rookie season. There's never a rookie that goes through a season and basically has 85 points other than Teemu Selanne, who had 76 goals. You don't get a rookie like that most times. And so, I didn't like the rookie wall thing too. And I didn't like – there's always that interplay between the Sabres and Leafs. I get it. But I think this was apples and oranges trying to compare.
Well, it's one thing to plan to rebuild, but it still comes down to being lucky. Jim Devellano, who used to be the Red Wings general manager, always talks about had their timing been a little different, they would have gotten Mario Lemieux instead of Joe Murphy in Detroit.
Right.
And you just don't know. Like this season, Kyle Woodleaf of Redline Report does USA Today's draft perspectives. And, he basically just wrote for our newspaper that, this is not a deep draft and it's not a great draft. And, there'll be players out of this draft because there's always players. But, this isn't the year that you wanted to be a down team. You wanted to be a down team last year.
Right.
So, or the year before.
Exactly.
And, this year, there just happens by coincidence that the guys at the top, the two of the guys have been hurt, and the Swedish defenseman, and Russ can speak to this better than I can, but he hasn't generated quite the buzz that had been anticipated. There just seems to be some issues. So the luck is still a part of it. Even if you were committed to rebuilding, you got to have the right draft in order to do it.
I think that's the case. And I think it's very I don't know. I'm going to be the voice of positivity here. Kevin and I can maybe take that positive side of this because versus you two. No, I'm
not being negative. I'm saying,
but I really think they're
2 to 3 years away. That's what they are.
Right, they are. And I think so. I think the Buffalo Sabres, considering they had Eichel for the last couple weeks, have not been terrible this year. And
that's why I'm not pinning it on Bilesma.
Yeah,
I have no problem with Dan Bilesma.
They're better this year, I think, that I would argue than the Oilers were last year when they lost McDavid.
No, I think I'm being objective when it comes to the Sabres, even though they're not my favorite organization, but I like what they're doing. And the thing is, the one thing that I think is the problem is they have a lot of money tied up still in aging players who are not going to be contributing as much as opposed to what Toronto has done and cleaned out most of the roster. Matt Molson, I think he's got 7 or 8 goals this year, but he's making $5 million. Zach Bogosian has been out of the lineup for most of the last 2 years. He's making over $5 million. Right now they've got $13 million in defensemen, and Georges, Bogosian, and I cannot think of the other defenseman, Kulikov, who have 2 assists in the entire season. That's to
do with Georges, okay? I think was clearly what Edmonton has made mistakes not doing, right? They tried to bring in a character player. They tried to bring in a guy who is not going to is not going to be a superstar, but is going to bring something good to the locker room, right? With so many young players. I think that was their plan with Georges.
Yeah, I actually thought the Sabres were headed in the right direction. I did the Reinhart. I agree with Russ on that the pick of that was the right move at that point in time. And they have Ristolainen, they have Eichel. The one thing I do think has hurt them, they gave away a lot of depth in the Kane trade. Like Claude Lemieux's kid, Brendan Lemieux, like he's not expected or projected to be a superstar, but playing in the league, and you need those guys. You need those depth guys that are going to come in and be role players and so forth. And they gave up a lot in that deal. And it seems like Murray was so focused on trying to get that premium, what he thought was a premium player in Evander Kane, that he didn't factor in that, hey, we are rebuilding and we need those depth. If you have 5 guys, you're hoping 1 or 2 of them are going to work out. And he gave away a few guys in that deal.
Yeah, I mean, he threw Joel Armia in that deal, and Armia has become one of the key takeaway guys in the NHL. He's doing well for Winnipeg, and again, that definitely set him back. Like, those trades didn't help him.
Yeah, they were expecting Bogosian to be a rock on the blue line. He has not been. He's been absent. And we know the off ice distractions that have been going on with Evander Kane. When he plays, when he's healthy, he plays well, but he keeps getting hurt, and then he keeps getting in trouble, and that's the problem with him.
I think that's almost the bigger problem. Is I mean, he's really out of chances. Like, you never know what goes on in the stuff behind the scenes, but if you're constantly involved in this and constantly being a couple of times, then it becomes troublesome for the team. So, and there's been a lot of chatter about, they were already looking to move him, trying to figure it wouldn't be best. And sometimes on a younger team that's rebuilding, it becomes even worse to have a distraction like that.
The one thing that gets written, Kev, and I always laugh, is, well, this team just needs another NHL defenseman. Well, so does every other team. And now even someone like Evander Kane on the open market doesn't even get you even a second pairing defenseman with all his issues. And that is a problem for a lot of teams. So unless you're drafting these kids, and that's where the Flyers did well, that's where a lot of other teams, the Rangers, have done well because they've been able to put some of their young defensemen in. Unless you have those defensive core coming, and the Kings have done well, even a guy like Gravel has filled in, Jake Muzzin, look what he's turned into. Unless you could do that, the Blackhawks do it. Unless you could do that, it now takes longer for you to rebuild because defense is the hardest thing to get. And when you get young defensemen, unless you're drafting in the top 10, most of those guys are not playing first year. Brandon Carlo is an absolute exception to that.
Yeah, well, Kulikov trade hurt both teams for this reason.
Yeah.
The Kulikov played well. That defensive group was pretty good for the Panthers, and they have not been able to recapture the magic. And he obviously was comfortable playing in that system and doesn't appear to be comfortable playing in Buffalo. They're working hard in Florida trying to figure out, well, if you change half your defensemen on a team that was pretty good defensively, you're sort of opening yourself up to the possibility that you won't play as well. And that's what's happened in Florida. They haven't played as well.
And the best case scenario for the Sabres would have been, Kulikov having a great year and then maybe re-signing him, or, taking him after having a good year and maybe flipping him at the deadline. But with him having no points and being the worst plus minus on the team, they'll be lucky if they get a mid-round draft pick for him. So that's, they've struck out on both ends.
Well, they need, even after that trade, like I remember writing, and others did as well, that the Sabres really needed to get 2 defensemen, and they thought they got 1 in Kulikov, and that hasn't worked out. So now they're still 2 defensemen short.
Right.
As well.
And they cost himself a former first-round pick in Mark Pysyk, who I think is not a bad defenseman. I think he could be a 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah, he's a serviceable NHL defenseman.
Yeah.
He is, no question about it. All right, I want to move on to something. The Blue Jackets for a second. I do want to talk to Kevin today about Team USA and the World Juniors, and as well. But I want to talk about the Blue Jackets for a second because you have to talk about the Blue Jackets for at least a second. I mean, they're the best team in the NHL, and they've won 13 games in a row, and this is just astonishing. Like the people I feel great for are the Blue Jackets fans. Like there were a lot, because I've been out there a couple times, and I know Blue Jacket fans, and they are diehard fans, and we're going to get one of them on later in the week, hopefully, to who's really a nice guy, who's actually Taylor Swift's keyboard player and musical director, who is a huge Blue Jackets fan and just really loves and is just like sending me great text after great text about, because after all these years of getting texts from him about how terrible this team was. I mean, what is happening, Kevin? Why are the Blue Jackets the best team in hockey?
Well, I mean, a variety of factors, but first and foremost is Bobrovsky is playing the way he did when he won the Vezina Trophy.
Right.
And we've talked about this before, but Jarmo Kekalainen said before the season, and I wrote this story, where I look at the standings from last year, he said, but I don't believe them. Like, they were 27th, I think, in the league. Right. And he said, most of you guys picked us to make the playoffs. A year ago. He said, we are that team that you picked to make the playoffs. He said, we just, for a variety of reasons, and what he didn't say, but what I was thinking is, well, Bobrovsky was injured and didn't really perform at the level that was anticipated. Well, so you bring in Bobrovsky, who's playing like the Vezina Trophy goalie. Now you add in Zach Werenski, and there were signs that he was going to be an impact player just on what he did in the American Hockey League at the end of last season after he left the University of Michigan. He went in and essentially won the AHL championship for them.
Yeah.
As a puck-moving defenseman. So he's slotted in. Like, how many, other than the Aaron Ekblad, how many young defensemen, move into a top pairing role and don't look out of place? So you add in that factor. Seth Jones has taken a step in his development. I think John Tortorella, has just persuaded this group that they can be successful by putting 100% effort in every game. Does that remind you of anything, Russ? Maybe the New York Rangers when they, he convinced them, he persuades them that they're good enough to compete. And, they're still lacking, in my opinion, a premium center. Yet
they know it. They know it. I've talked to them.
And yet they get more than enough goals. Their scoring is enough. And Tortorella has done a phenomenal job with this group.
About it for him. I mean, geez.
Buying in, I think he's evolved as a coach. I think, I don't know this, but I got to believe someone, close to him, maybe Mike Sullivan, maybe some of the other guys that he trusts have said to him, hey, John, you got to change. I mean, you're running out of chances, just a little bit. Your shelf life isn't what it could be now.
Right.
And that shelf life's important. Like, let's look at the what happened with the Americans at the World Cup. I mean, what did most of those guys say about John Tortorella after that short tournament? They loved him.
Yeah.
They like that shtick that he has. They like that flag raising. They like, we're going to be hard to play against and all that. They love that. Now, that wears on you over time, but over in the short term, well, he's kind of won over these Blue Jackets. So it's been a variety of factors. And I believe in this team. I do, but I believe that in order to win in the postseason, you got to have lost and sort of figured out how to win. Like, they're going to get to the postseason, and it's going to be a whole different world because
they did a couple years ago, right? They went to that Penguins. That Penguin series was losing to learn how to win, but I guess a lot of these players.
I mean, you can make that case, but I still think there's more to it than that. So I think when they have to face, the teams that have been there, the Capitals have a lot of experience in the playoffs. The Penguins have won the Stanley Cup. The New York Lundqvist has had about 1.5 billion games in the playoffs. Like, all that, I think, is going to be a factor. I believe in the Blue Jackets, but I think it's fair to wonder whether or not they'll be ready as the other teams for the playoffs, just because they don't have similar experience.
Yeah, that's fair. And the fascinating thing, though, they still have $8.5 million of cap space. which is interesting because, like you say, they don't have that top center, but they can sure go get them for the trade deadline if they want to.
But where, though? I just had this discussion with a Blue Jacket fan who brought up that they're going to go out and get someone. And I said, identify that guy, because guess what? All the GMs can't find him. Most teams I talked to said there are no guys out there.
Well, I think that guy could very well be Matt Duchene.
Well, it can't be, but they're asking a lot. I mean, I think that Matt Duchene, could be traded, but like, I saw your thing, and that's not nearly enough, because here's why. Like, I think they'd be willing to trade him, but they need somebody back. This is what I've been told, and want somebody back that they can control. They can't control Shattenkirk.
Right. Yeah. They would have that. What I was told is they would do the conditional draft pick, but also you would assume that they would talk ahead of time and probably get the thing done.
I was told that the only way they would make that deal is if they get a player back, a young player, a Fabre type, somebody like that, where they're going to get someone back that they control as well.
Yeah.
So.
And if you're talking about Columbus when it comes to Duchesne, the first guy they're going to ask for is Seth Jones, probably because he's a controllable defenseman, and there was history with him and Joe Sakic going back to before the draft. So,
right.
I mean, I watched.
His dad played in that city too.
Right, I watched a lot of that game.
All right, if you're Columbus, do you do that trade?
No way.
No. And I don't think Colorado is going to trade Matt Duchesne. I think they need to hold on to Duchesne, Landeskog, and McKinnon, because I don't think they're at the point where they may have gotten some great results a couple of years ago, but they're in a Patrick Waugh hangover situation. They're starting to retool again, and you can't lose guys like this. They're not going to get back enough value to replace Matt Duchesne, who's almost a point a game, because if they lose him, they really lose a lot. They really, at this point, they have some guys coming, Rantanen's coming, but they need to. I don't think Joe Sakic is going to trade him. I really don't. Being an offensive guy like he is, unless he were getting like a top pairing defenseman like a Seth Jones, I don't think he would get traded.
Let me stop right here. What is that ESPN show where the guys talk and they make points and you don't understand the scoring and the guy just says he just got 50 points?
Yeah.
Russ just got 150 points. Because what Russ just said is also the same thing I said when O'Reilly was in the trade market. Like, why in God's earth is it all about trading O'Reilly? Like, to me, I would have done everything in my power to keep O'Reilly because he is the center that everybody is looking for in the NHL. He's gritty.
I think they tried everything.
They didn't try hard enough, in my opinion.
They sabotaged that right from the beginning.
Remember there was a whole bunch. Remember there were a bunch of times O'Reilly could have left and they didn't. They didn't let him.
It was because he was drafted behind Duchesne, and they didn't want to pay him as much as Duchesne, and he had to sign that offer sheet to get paid as much as Duchesne. For some reason, they were bound and determined not to pay Ryan O'Reilly because they had this salary structure in place, and it was asinine because what you do is you keep your best players, and they ended up getting robbed in that trade.
Did it have something to do with Patrick Waugh? You would think it would have had to have.
I don't think it had anything to do with Waugh. I think it had to do with all the past that was going on with O'Reilly.
They didn't like the negotiations and how they went.
Right, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I'll give Russ those 150 points, and I'll just say that I don't disagree with him. I'm just saying what I've heard, but I don't agree with this trade at all. Like I don't agree. Even the Shattenkirk trade, which I threw out today, I don't think is a great deal for obviously what you should be getting from Matt Duchesne. Unless you have Shattenkirk signed for a reasonable number, which you're not going to be able to do, because if he could sign for a reasonable number, he would be signing for a reasonable number in St. Louis, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
So the issue there is you've got to talk to him. I know what these rumors sometimes can be is, maybe it's Colorado trying to drive up the price or trying to show interest and stuff like that stuff's happening out there. There's no real untouchable player besides McKinnon, I've been told, but that at the same time that I think that there are players who are really, who they need to move. They need to make a trade.
I think you have the right formula here. If they do trade Duchesne, it's going to be for a defenseman. But I just I agree with Kevin that unless Shattenkirk agrees to sign an extension, it doesn't make any sense for Colorado. What makes more sense are teams like Minnesota or Nashville or Anaheim that need offense and have tons of defense and are going to be in trouble when it comes to the expansion draft to be able to protect all the defensemen that they have. Right. They could, and all those teams I think need offense.
I'm giving 100 points too to Mike.
Man, I gotta get some points here somehow.
So Russ is at 150. I'm giving 120 right there to Mike because that makes so much sense. Like Minnesota, getting a player like Shattenkirk on the short term, you move out. Maybe you give Brodin back as part of the deal, and and other things as well. So St. Louis, who is going to lose him, there's a deal there. Then, but here's the other thing to factor in. As well, and I've brought this up and been told by general managers that this is certainly part of the equation. Shattenkirk is the Blues' second leading scorer, and they're a good team.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and they're going to make a run.
Yeah.
So they're going to be real careful. Like, they're not going to trade them for prospects, and they're looking to get some help back. So from that sort of perspective, it would make sense, and they could use the center. So but I don't know why the Avalanche would want to trade Duchesne. To me, you keep those 3 or 4 guys that you got that you're building around, and they'll go from there. But Shattenkirk, I'm sure there's trades out there that can be made that would satisfy the Blues.
Well, there's a potentially big game coming up on Saturday night. So let's get to that for a second. And it's the game of the year, okay, which is, and no one, if you had told me at the beginning of the year that this was the game of the year, you need to get tickets for it, this is New Year's Eve, a New Year's Eve throwdown in Columbus between the Columbus Blue Jackets, who at that point, as long as they can beat one more team tomorrow night, would have won 14 games in a row, will be playing against the Minnesota Wild, who, if they can beat the Islanders, will have won 13 in a row. So you'll have that going on, or 12 and 14 in a row. A team has won 12, a team has won 14 in a row, facing off against each other. The Wild and the Blue Jackets on New Year's Eve night. It's just.
Well, I said yesterday, I think Devin Dubnyk right now is the best goalie in hockey. Until he proves otherwise, he's got the shutouts to prove it and everything else. And it's not like Darcy Kempner is a bad backup. They're in a good spot. They need a little more scoring, but this is a good matchup. I think Columbus will take him in this matchup, though, because I think Tortorella will game plan it in such that he'll suck out any kind of offense from the Minnesota game and just win it close.
Yeah.
I think now he's comfortable enough with his defense that he could play that game, and I think he will.
What's funny about this? Here's a real funny little story. There's a lot of superstition around teams. I talked to a player on the Blue Jackets, okay, who basically was saying, how much they didn't want the Christmas break. They're like, we don't want the 3 days. Don't give us the 3. We don't need the 3 days. And then coming back, that's why he said we got to win against Boston. It was such a big game for them to show that it wasn't just something that happened before 3 simple days off to celebrate Christmas and break the routine. They're in such a superstitious pattern. It's very funny.
And you know what? You have to give credit. One of the stories that's sort of been under the covers, so to speak, has been Eric Stahl's resurgence in Minnesota. He's leading that team in scoring, and he's playing very well. And that was they got him on a 3-year deal for less than $4 million. If he can continue to do that for the length of that contract, that was a steal of a deal for Chuck Fletcher.
Well, there's some great irony about that. I was told from a very good source that the other team Eric Stahl almost went to, the Columbus Blue Jackets. So can you imagine? Stahl could have been a Blue Jacket, and that would have given them their top center.
Well, just going back to the Blue Jackets right now. Right now the way that they're surviving is their power play is insane. It is ridiculously successful right now. I think Alexander Wenberg is leading the NHL in power play assists or power play points. I think it's assists. Nick Foligno is having another great year. Cam Atkinson's having a career year. They're getting all these performances. They're getting balanced scoring and contributions even from their fourth line. But I think they're probably going to have to get themselves a center if they win that division, though. They avoid those first round matchups against the Rangers in Pittsburgh. They would play, the lowest ranked wild card team. So they
don't really have to get that center. John Tortorella took the Rangers to the Stanley Cup with Derek Stepan as the number 1 center. He's not a number 1 center, so he could do that. He's done it before.
All right, who's the lead?
I'm not so sure the Wild aren't, the best team in the NHL right now. They're number 1 in goals against, and they're the Minnesota Wild, despite the fact everybody thinks they need scoring, they're I think one of 5 teams averaging 3 goals per game.
Yeah.
So
these teams are just.
I think they're 4th or 5th in scoring. You can look it up, but it's up there. And Bruce Boudreau, as well as I think that Tortorella has done to sort of against the Blue Jackets. Boudreau has been the absolute perfect person. And, hey, say what you will about his postseason record. And, it's fair. He hasn't been able to do it in the postseason. But the guy's remarkable in his ability to pull the most out of his players during the
regular season. He's been able to do that. The postseason matters, Kev. It does.
Well, of course it does. But I guess my question is it just bad luck, or is something going on? And
I think luck. I think luck.
There was a theory in Anaheim that his players love him too much.
Right.
that they worry about him,
Yeah.
and therefore they can't play because they're trying to sort of win for him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work out. Now I don't know
I
what
think there was a stubbornness with him too. Like he messed around with the goaltending too much in every organization. He was reluctant to make line changes. Like he does have certain things that don't work in his favor in the playoffs too.
Well, he has no chance of messing his goaltending up in Minnesota.
Right.
He's not going to go Darcy Kemper over Devin Dubnyk.
No, this time he won't.
But and I've listened to that argument as well, Russ. But my argument back to that is, tell me one coach in the NHL who doesn't believe that he knows best when it comes to playing his personnel. Like they're all like that. They're all stubborn when it comes to I think I know my team.
But the ones that acquiesce end up winning. He sometimes doesn't acquiesce.
Yeah, well, they don't usually acquiesce, but
then the good ones don't.
I mean,
right?
Joel Quenneville. I mean, look at the decisions he made on defense. I mean, a guy like Trevor Daley couldn't play for him, and then Trevor Daley gets traded and he goes and plays for the Stanley Cup champions. So some coaches make these decisions and it's to their own detriment.
Yeah.
Here's a crazy stat for today. Okay, the third leading scorer in the month of December in the NHL is a defenseman. Okay, you guys will never guess who this is, but he's the guy who's been who let's see, in the last 3 years was benched by his team, has been traded to a new team, traded. I guess it was just traded, right? Yep, re-signed for very little money this year. And has gotten ripped just up and down by fans, and he was a member of the Edmonton Oilers. Okay, so that's a lot of hints.
Schultz?
Justin Schultz, yes. Third in the NHL in points in the month of December. Justin Schultz, how about that? I mean, I'm
not shocked. He's fit in well there, and I really liked what he did for Pittsburgh. I'm not completely shocked by that.
Well, no, neither, because in Edmonton he was supposed to be the guy. In Pittsburgh, he's just supposed to contribute.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
and that makes a big difference.
The thing is, he's benefited from the fact that Chris Letang is out, so he's now on their power play, and now he's probably going to get even more ice time because Brian Dumoulin is out 6 to 8 weeks with a broken jaw. So that defense, which was a no-name defense, well, it's going to even be more of a no-name defense now without Dumoulin and Letang.
Yeah, I mean, you guys all saw the feel-good story about Alain Vigneault. He flew the Ottawa Senators charter back to get to be with his family on the Christmas holidays.
Yeah.
No.
Wow.
That's kind of cool,
It is.
That a team would do that. I really think that's a really neat thing. All right, so I want to talk before we get out of here. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to talk about Team USA and the World Juniors for a second. The first game they won, obviously, they won their first game. They play again today. They play Slovakia today. The World Juniors is pretty much gone, as I think most people expected to this point, right? There's no real crazy.
Not exactly.
No? Okay.
No.
All right. Well, but we got into a discussion the other day, and I wanted to hold off until we had Kevin back on the air about this. So, Team USA and how Team USAs are built. All right. So we're not just talking Team USAs here, but we're talking the Team USA that just played in the World Cup of Hockey. We're talking Team USA in the last Olympics. We're talking this Team USA. Decisions to leave skilled players behind,
right,
to form a team that has a first line, second line, third line, and fourth line. And Kevin and I had that discussion a lot before, I know. But I really felt like Latvia, there was 1-1 way too long, right? They did get it together. That's not atypical, I guess, of the first game of a World Cup or a World Tournament, that you have a team like Latvia hang around for a while, or the Team USA is playing not to lose, which they looked really afraid for a while. But I just question. I think Team USA. This is my theory. They need to get a grip on the whole USA hockey program has to understand that they need to just start throwing their best players into these situations and not try to do the first line, second line, third line, fourth line thing, because the first line, second line, third line, fourth line thing implies that the only way they can win is to do that. And I think they have enough skilled players to actually compete skill for skill.
I'll let Kev go first, then I'll
We're
tell you.
talking about DeBrincat? Is that what?
Yeah, the DeBrincat's the one. There's a couple. There's another one too. And we talked about it.
Logan Brown.
Yeah.
Well, Logan Brown, who's coming off of an injury. I think DeBrincat is the big question. I mean, hey, look, it's fair, to you got to make hard choices.
Yeah.
But this team does have a lot of first round picks.
Yeah.
On it, and he did not distinguish himself in the last tournament. Ron Wilson did say at the end though that he appreciated the fact that he accepted his role, but he got suspended right out of the bat last time, and I was told by the people who were there that he didn't have a good camp. And now the argument against that is he's had a good season and he's playing, very, very, very well. But it's not like they have no offense. Clayton Keller is a dynamic player. Yeah. White looks good. Thompson has stepped up. Greenway has also kind of escalated in his development. So I think it's fair to wonder why he wasn't on the team. But Canada goes through this all the time. They leave guys off.
But their biggest problem is on defense, Kev. Like they went with Jack Ashan, who literally is the coach's pretty much best player in college, right? Is he going to be the best player in this tournament? Is he going to be the best defenseman? No. And he's 5'7", and when they start going up against some of these bigger teams, that's where Latvia started to have a problem. The U.S. had a problem with them. You cut Chad Chris, who was a returning player. You only have 2 returning players, so that's a problem right in and of itself. I mean, we were told that on the PK they were going to be an attacking team, but yet what we saw for most of that game on the PK was a collapsing box, and they were giving Latvia all kinds of room. If they give room like that to Canada, guys like Dylan Strome would shoot out the lights. So I saw a lot of problems systematically for the first half of that game where things were failing, and then they did get it together because, hey, it's Latvia. If you play a good period, you can beat them. Slovakia is going to be the same way. Slovakia is going to give them a problem for a while, I think, because Adam Huska is a good goalie, and they do have some decent players. But again, you could overcome them by just playing a couple of good periods. But I think they're a 3rd or 4th place team because they're putting too many minutes on the back of Charles McAvoy. He's an excellent defenseman. I love the guy, but he's just got way too much on his shoulders. If you start, and Khalid Jones is no Seth Jones. I mean, that's another thing. And so when you start looking at their defense, I think there's nothing wrong with their offense. We could talk about the guys that were cut, but their defense, like there's a kid, Luke Martin, who was part of the under-18 team. He didn't get a look. I mean, I get they don't like to put a lot of young defensemen, but they now have some small defensemen too, and they're all offensive-minded. There's very few tough defensemen on that team.
Do you think there was enough defensemen that were left off that could have made that a good defense, or just?
Well, it could have made it better. I mean, if nothing else, I think Chad Chris would make it better because he's an experienced player in that system in international play. Even just that one addition would make it better, but they went with Foley, right? They went with Sean. They went with guys that haven't had a lot of experience.
I think that's fair as well. But although I didn't think there was enough, no matter who they put on it, like that was going to be their weakness, regardless of what happened.
I think that's fair too.
Yeah.
No, all this is true, and I'm not trying to. But my main point here is like a philosophical point of this concept of I feel like we are selling ourselves short as an American hockey program to continually say, well, that we're going to just put 4 lines together that are 4 lines, and not, and almost as if we're afraid to throw our best players on the ice. Not afraid, but just that if we throw our best, we say these are our best 20 players. They're going to go up against Canada's best 20 players, because Canada does have problems about players being left off all the time. Mm-hmm. True. But they really don't ever do, they always think, at least in their head, they're putting the best players on the ice.
Well, Russ has made this point before about, the fact that at the under-18s, the way the U.S. picks their teams is they just pick all the best players. And that's that structure that we're talking about, going back to the 2010 Olympics, going back to the World Cup. I was in favor of Chris Drury making the 2010 Olympics because, okay, he was a great face-off guy and a great penalty killer. But the thing is, if you're talking about the best 12 forwards, there's no way in hell Chris Drury should have been on that team. So I mean, that is a philosophy that the Canadians had back in the '90s when they picked, and I cannot think of the guy, guys like Rob Zaminer,
Gagne, and it was a disastrous thing for them.
Yeah, I mean, just pick your 12 best players, and if you have to move John Tavares to the wing or Steven Stamkos to the wing, you do it. But you just
I'll tell you, here's the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is, and especially with this team, they went heavy on college players, and there's very few players from anywhere outside of that realm. A good example is I interviewed Kevin LeBanc this past summer, right? And he's a kid who led the OHL in scoring twice. He's a kid that is now doing well for the San Jose Sharks. He is an American. He's from Staten Island. He never gets a sniff for any of these international teams. And I asked him specifically, would he like to play on these teams? And he said, yeah, if they would choose me. And so there is a lot of players like Kevin LeBanc out there that never even get into the mix.
Do you think they're not playing in college? Like they're going for college players?
Well, no, a guy like Jeremy Bracco, he was on Austin Matthews' wing at the under-18s and did very well. Then he went from Boston College. He left after 5 games. He went to Kitchener in the OHL. He didn't get invited to the preliminary camp for Team USA last year. This year, you could not ignore the fact that he was leading the OHL for a time. They had to choose him. But
so was DeBrincat, though, right?
Well, right, but DeBrincat is. I mean, this was his draft year, and Bracco was drafted in 2015. Maybe they figured 19-year-old, he was more mature. Whatever. All I know is he probably should have been chosen last year because they needed scoring, especially on the power play, and that's where he is great at. So, I mean, just pick the 12 best forwards. Just pick the 7 or 8 best defensemen. Don't pick roles. Pick the best talent.
Kevin?
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, you're still trying to put together a team. I guess I got to know who the 12 players are. The reason why Canada can do that is Canada can do that because they're choosing. They got 16 superstars, and the idea is that Tavares, if you ask him, he could be a great role player.
Mm-hmm.
And America's not usually doing that. Their players are, they have 16, 17 guys, and the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 guys, have different skill sets that they're trying to choose between. It's a scorer versus a checker. I don't know. As I said, I think it's fair to wonder why DeBrincat's not on there. Logan Brown, I think if he was not coming off an injury, would have been on that team. I think they would have wanted his size. Yeah. And their goalie is from the OHL, Parsons.
Right, he's one of 2. That's it.
Right. They only have 2 junior players on the team.
That's it.
Yeah, him and Bracco are the only 2.
That's it.
Right.
Wow, that's pretty.
I mean, that's been a criticism for years.
But it wasn't that way a couple of years ago, and they've slipped sort of back into that. And then the returning player factor. If you really want to do well in these tournaments, you want as many returning players as you can, and they got 2.
And it's not exactly a bold statement because Ryan Miller stood on his head in 2010, and that was the reason that the U.S. got to the gold medal game. I mean, if the U.S. wants to get to the championship in this tournament, it's going to be on the back of Tyler Parsons because he's won a Memorial Cup. He's a really good goaltender. He didn't face a lot of shots against Latvia, but he's going to have to stand on his head against Canada and these teams going through the playoff rounds to be able to get to the finals.
Who were the other guys other than DeBrincat and Brown who were off of CHL teams that got cut or didn't get a sniff?
I'd have to look it up, but
those were the 2. Those were the 2 biggies. But we probably could find another 1 or 2 if we start digging.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there are guys out there. I just wondered. I couldn't, off the top of my head, I couldn't think of who else should have been on the team.
It's just interesting. I mean, I remember Canada going through this and this whole moment when Canada decided they were going to change the way they did things, and since then, Canada's been crazy good, right? I mean, they've been dominant, especially at the Olympic level.
It was after Nagano in 90.
Right, after Nagano, when you had guys like you're talking about, some role players playing on the team, and I get they have to build teams, but I just think these tournaments are too short to do that. I think these tournaments are too short to build teams. I think these tournaments have to be about star players. It takes a while to build a team. And for character players to have impacts, it takes a while sometimes.
Yeah, well, we had this argument at the World Cup, and we disagreed. And I just don't think they were good enough. And I think the next time around, and that's the one thing I noted in Game 1, is I started to think about, I keep talking about that. Matthews and Eichel are already USA's top 2 centers. And in 2018 they're 1 and 2, but and obviously Werenski I think will be on that team as well.
Yeah, he'll be. And
if you remember what I said last time, I was a little unsure about Gostisbehere, and I just didn't know whether he'd be ready. I mean, he's a very gifted offensive player. And I still say it, but one of the guys, and I don't think he's going to be ready for 2018, but I think Keller, I know a scout told me.
I don't see how you don't put him on, I'll be honest.
Yeah, no, a scout told me that he could be Patrick Kane, and, maybe he can be,
Wow.
I mean, he's a little different, but he's going to have similar scoring. I don't think it'll be as great, but I think it's going to be really close, and I don't see how you don't keep him on. But that's my whole thing is there's guys that there is this thinking like, well, he's not ready, or well, he's not a star, but I don't think they do a good enough job identifying stars. Like the kid I brought up, LeBanc, what if he has 20 goals this year? Would he ever be considered? And he's been ignored his whole career pretty much by the USA system, except for like early tournaments in his career. There's a lot of guys like that. Too many.
Is it the small bias? I mean, LeBanc is small, DeBrincat's small, Baracco is small. Is it that?
I mean, LeBanc's not that small. I think he's 5'11".
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting. I mean, after the last World Championships, there was a drumbeat about changing the system. I mean, the way that the team is selected now is they have that GM committee that puts teams together. And at the World Cup, it was a smaller group than we've done in the past. It was,
right.
Lombardi, where it was the whole committee last time, and then in the World Cup it was Lombardi, Holmgren, and Burke were the prime movers and shakers. So
right,
it'll be interesting to see as they move forward. But
yeah, I mean, there's just so much talent, and that next Olympic team, if there is a next Olympic team, that the U.S. puts on, and
it's interesting. I think Keller is the guy that, if the NHL doesn't go, I wonder if Keller is going to be on that team anyway. Like when I did my projections, he was the best player because
interesting.
The Coyotes probably think, as probably everybody does, he just needs to get stronger. Right. So is he really going to be ready to play in the NHL next year at his size? Unless he adds a bunch of So if that's the case,
here's a good example. So for whatever reason, LeBanc did play on like under 17 and under 18 teams, right? He is 5'11". Then things went dead for him, and then in 2015 he has 107 points. He's not on any team. In 2016, 127 points.
Right.
He's not on any team. And now he's got 6 goals in the NHL. He's only 21 years old. Like, he has clearly slipped through the system.
Well,
so he would have been eligible for the juniors when he had 127 points.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, 107. The year he's having 107.
And I know we have to go here, but what I'm wondering is if the NHL doesn't go to the Olympics in 2018, whether players from the AHL will be able to go.
Well, that's the big question, and what hasn't been answered. And it goes even beyond that. Like, would they allow them, for example, let's just pretend this is a poor example because he's probably going to be on another team. Let's say Darling was on the Chicago Blackhawks, and so now the Olympic tournament's going to be 16 days. Well, he'd probably only play one game for the Blackhawks during that period of time as a backup.
Right.
Do you let him go over and be America's goalie?
Yeah.
Why not?
The Blackhawks would want to let him go, though.
That's exactly the point. So, and would you let your top prospects go from the AHL thinking, well, what if I need them?
Right.
So,
and of course, if there isn't an Olympics, does the next World Cup of Hockey scrap the the under 23 team, and do we get to see the real Canada and USA play each other? That's the other question. There's lots of fun stuff that could come about that too.
It's like there's a real drum beat for that behind the scenes. I thought that I didn't mind the U23 team, so
I loved it, but it felt like there was just this very specific time of those specific players, and if you did it again, I don't know if it would have the same oomph.
Yeah, I think that's fair as well.
That was just such a special group of young players.
It was a special group.
Yeah.
And that team, I feel so the biggest privilege I feel about going to that tournament was being one of the rare people who got a chance to see them play. Like to actually see that team live was unbelievably phenomenal, and just beyond. I mean, it was like watching the Oilers when you first saw the Edmonton Oilers coming at you, and you're like, what the heck is this? All these fast, crazy players, and it was just that's what it felt like, and I never thought you'd get a chance to feel that again of just a totally different team. That's why I'm banging the drum that the All-Star game should be under 23 versus over 23. But anyway, we had lots of discussions to talk about in the future. We had no time left now, though. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kevin, so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Remember, guys, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Happy holidays.